What's up, everybody? Today we talked to Kurt Melcher from Robert Morris University. He's the executive director of esports at Robert Morris. So today we touched a little bit on the infrastructure of collegiate esports, how that could or could not fit within the NCAA model, and then we kind of talked about the esports program at Robert Morris, and he talked about how he developed a program 5 years ago, some of the pitfalls and some of the successes that they've had along the way. So here's the interview. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Tyler Levesque, and I am the coordinator of esports here at Wichita State University. And today we have Kurt Melcher from Robert Morris University joining us today. How you doing, Kurt?
Good. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no problem. So just kind of before we dive into everything, I'd love to just maybe talk a little bit about yourself, your experience within the industry.
Sure. So I'll go kind of way back in my background. So I played college athletics at University of Illinois Chicago on the soccer team. I was a scholarship athlete. At the same time, my free time, I just loved competitive gaming. It's just always been a part of what I did and what I love to do. At that time, this is a little bit ways back, was like Sega Genesis was like kind of the
Yeah,
and I had a PC too, but like Sega Genesis was sort of like the console that was popular at the time, and there was this game NHLPA. You may have seen it from that movie Swingers, like where you can make Gretzky bleed, like
yeah.
that game. Was like one of the bigger sport titles. So I used to run tournaments out of what that time was our apartment, and we grew this tournament basis. So it started with just like the soccer team, then it grew in the athletic department, then it grew to like my history class, and then everyone else. It grew to like 80 people.
Yeah.
It grew to a scale where I got a letter from the athletic director, like a cease and desist letter, because it was like $25 to get in the it was like gambling.
Yeah.
Kind of, right? So
Yeah,
we had like 15 systems through this all across this 3 flat of every room, everything. It was a massive hassle to organize and run. So I was thankful for that, but it's just always been something I've been really passionate about. I used to write for, you're too young, but there were game magazines, right?
Yeah.
I used to write game reviews and
Love it.
editorials. So it's just something I've been always passionate about. Growing up in the Midwest, there wasn't particularly like unless you were a designer or coder or something, which I just probably don't have the math skills or ability to do so. So there wasn't really a way for me to interact like professionally with gaming or esports other than just like love it and nurture and hug it.
I love it. Yeah.
So I went and worked in college athletics. That's another passion point of mine, right? I love soccer. So that's when those two worlds kind of merged, when League of Legends, just me playing and also watching like the pro side, when I learned through the client really that there was this college scene growing and Riot was supporting it, and there were competitions, and I knew really the value in esports like you do, and how you can develop a player through real coaching, and you can actually make players better and value it as the students. So in 2013, kind of conceptualized, ideated an idea, brought it to administration in 2014, and through your process, it takes a long time to get people to understand and buy in. Right?
Definitely.
But I give props to Wichita. I mean, I think they've gone about it the right way and are doing so in the right way. It's awesome to see. So we were the first school to build a facility on campus, to hire staff, to scholarship, and we launched with League of Legends scholarship, and really put it in athletics, treat it like as we do with any other sport. So that was in 2014 when we launched, and honestly, to my surprise, it was this massive media story. I maybe I was naive, or it just didn't occur to me, but it was almost overwhelming. So through some of that media, a company where I also work at now, Intersport, they're literally like 8 blocks away from Robert Morris, which is Intersport is a media production agency. They were being approached by brands saying, "Hey, we're hearing about this thing with esports." So they really didn't know what it was, and they're like, "Hey, would you be willing to come here, provide a point of view?" I did in 2016, and then that's kind of where I'm working on both sides right now, Intersport and Robert Morris. That's
Nice.
a long story background.
Yeah, no, that's super exciting to hear, especially because we have a lot of similarities in terms of being in the Midwest, starting programs. And Robert Morris has kind of been one of the programs in terms of building Wichita State's program that I have used as a template, as a guide to build our program. So unbeknownst to you, without you even knowing, you're having an influence on all these other schools without you even,
Right.
probably hearing from me on a day-to-day basis. So you definitely need to know that, and I can promise you that other schools that are building programs are doing the same thing. So one, thank you for that, and then two, I feel as if a lot of these interviews, anything that you've been a part of, they're always going to ask about intersport and the NCAA. So I guess we can kind of start there. But
Sure.
how did intersport essentially kind of secure its role as a part of the NCAA's process in prospecting collegiate esports?
Sure. So that came about. So I'd been working at Intersport for I don't know, maybe 9 months, maybe a year,
Sure.
and we had heard that the NCAA actually they issued an RFP.
Hmm.
And it was, we don't know esports. We need to understand what's happening on the on college campuses.
Definitely.
Um, and that was in a response to all the member institutions, because I think at that time there were maybe like 30 to 40 schools that had sort of formalized,
Okay.
but a lot of schools were calling them saying like, hey, what's happening in esports, and they're like, we don't know.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
they needed a point of view, and they knew that they didn't know,
Yeah.
so they issued an RFP, and actually there's Intersport as part of the agency services as a really robust consulting
Hmm.
arm to it. So said it would just make sense, right? Because I think there's only a handful of people that really know, like you're one of them, but there's not
Sure.
many, right?
Yeah.
And then have like a consultant sort of chops that we're able to respond to. So
Hmm.
we were one of 4 finalists, and there were like I don't know exactly the other three, but I'm assuming there's some like major like consulting agencies within there. But then we
Hmm.
won that business just through on how we were planning on approaching it and how we would go about it. So really for like the better of like I guess like 18 months now is that's how that process came about.
Okay. So over the span of that 18 months, I guess at this point, it's been a long period of time. Could you, elaborate possibly on the positives and the negatives of the collegiate esports model fitting within the NCAA model?
Yeah, and that's and that is the hurdle. Obviously, you just right from the jump, you can you call out like some of the hurdles that are
Definitely.
related to the
Yeah.
NCAA model, amateurism,
Mhm.
um, Title IX,
Mhm.
and we can talk more about that.
Mhm.
Um, Schools are like Wichita, right? Are organized and formalized
They
within
are.
in an academic unit, or is it?
So we're actually we're housed under the student affairs department, which I've technically fall under campus recreation as well. So
Sure.
it's kind of a hybrid between the College of Applied Studies, student affairs, campus rec. So it's an academic unit for sure. It's not housed within any athletic unit.
Right, right, and that's what we see that with University of Akron is in the
Mhm.
honors college.
Mhm.
University of Utah is in their game design program.
Mhm.
UCI is in their student services, and
Mhm.
that's how schools are different. So
Mhm.
they're depending on their goals, they're addressing esports and ideating it on how they want to implement it, which is fine,
Mhm.
right? Like that's schools should be able to do that. But that's potential, right? It's outside of like what we think about with traditional athletics
Yeah.
and NCAA athletics. So those just calling out those hurdles. But where I think about NCAA and myself coming from an athletic background and being like a student athlete,
Mhm.
um, I think it's easy to, and I probably may have at one time fallen in that camp to point the finger at NCAA, say, oh well, they are just 100% taking advantage of student athletes, right? And I believe that
Sure.
that narrative exists, but I think it's that headline is easy to grasp on and sort of back up, but there's also
Mhm.
a lot of positives that NCAA brings to student athletes across the athletic landscape. So,
Mhm.
um, you know, that balance, right? I think that's where esports needs to look at.
Mhm.
Collegiate side is like, okay, what are the pluses and minuses that come with potentially, right? Because there is no,
No.
yeah, and
Yeah.
I just want to clear up. I'm not speaking for the NCAA. This is my own right
Yeah.
now,
Look, hey, we're
my own ideas right now.
for sure.
Um, so like I think that's just how it has to be approached, right? And
Yeah.
just like, okay, well, what could the potential positives be?
Mhm.
Is part of that narrative, right?
Mhm.
Um, and that's kind of what we have to look at when you think like what is if the value proposition to esports uh, a lot of talk track is like, well, we're taking a ton of money away from students, right? Because they are monetizing their Twitch channels, and they're winning tons and tons of prize money in the collegiate space. And through our research, when we spoke to 120 universities, and when we did that, we spoke to athletic directors, we talked to student leaders of clubs, people like yourself, even in formal programs, and also talked to like student um, services leads that oversee like and we said like, okay, well, how much, and that was a constant narrative point, was like, well, this, if there was some kind of formalization, they would lose so much money. But it's like, well, how many would it affect in your program? It was like zero. So there really are, but that's not to say like in 10 years, what does that look like? Right? Does that whole narrative change? And is it potentially, because the amateurism model is steadfast, that is as a part of the NCAA that is just going to have to come with the equation.
It is,
so that is what happens potentially, and how does esports address it collegiately, right? So part of our research is that wouldn't affect like it would affect like 0.01% of esports players, maybe like Bloodwater or UCI, who used to monetize a stream Twitch back in the day, which really isn't happening anymore. But again, like that's, now you have to say like in 10 years, what does that look like, right?
Definitely.
So it's like, when I think about also like what is the benefits to the negatives, and when I see, I think even when I talk to people that outside of esports, but on the college administration side, and you talk about, say, which I'm sure like the Big East initiative of
definitely. I was going to try and touch on that too.
They're that's great, right? But that really hasn't trickled down to the student. Really, all the Big East is club side is doing is sort of like herding the cats and saying like, hey, we could kind of slap our logo on, not on you guys, but on what you're doing already, and try to coalesce it into a broadcast format. Maybe we can monetize against that broadcast, but you guys just keep doing what you're doing. I don't see a whole value proposition down to them. They're still like playing from their dorm room, still maybe trying to hustle to get a room. And when I think about athletics, there's not a world where a school would say, hey, let's add a men's soccer program, and we are going to just where did you guys practice? Just in the field over there? Okay, let's get some cones, set them up, and then that will be our game.
Yeah,
that's just doesn't happen. It wouldn't happen like
that. Definitely.
So, and again, when I think about when we talk to say AJ Dimmick at Utah, and said gone through his experience in where he's in the game design program, he's a fantastic person, does really great work over there, but he finds himself just duplicating a lot of the activities that athletics does every day, whether it's fundraising, sport reporting, eligibility monitoring, human performance, whether that's like training and fitness and nutrition. So that's all happening on campus already at a high level.
It is.
And all those capabilities are there. He's like, I have to do it all myself, or get, like a student worker to try to replicate that. So there's resources on campuses. It's just like, how do we find ways to maybe take what's best from there? Trade off.
So I guess kind of another big issue is intellectual property and dealing with that issue as well. And so in terms of where the NCAA can come in and handle that issue, along with you see a lot of schools hosting fairly large tournaments with a lot of these different games, and are these schools taking the correct processes in terms of reaching out to developers and utilizing different types of agreements that you have to actually use in terms of hosting large scale tournaments? And is the NCAA going to play a factor in that, or what's been your experience at Robert Morris and things like that in terms of intellectual property and dealing with any of those issues?
Yeah, that is, it was maybe just because it's just like so automatic to me, but I didn't mention it as one of the hurdles. That is certainly like you think about collegiate is the publishers, right, and intellectual property. So NCAA recognizes that for sure. So it's like there's no world where it could just be like, hey, we're doing it and we'll see.
We'll just see how it goes.
It has to be lockstep and with publishers in mind and part of the process holistically. Otherwise, it just that it doesn't work, right? But you're right. I do see tournaments all the time where it's just like propped up, and And I think it's right now, for the time being, I think publishers are like, well, gee, that feels kind of bad, but we don't want to shut it down. If I think they do sometimes, if it's in direct competition to something that they're organizing and putting
Sure.
resources against.
Sure.
But I think, to your point, as that escalates, I think there's a reckoning coming for some of those operators if they're not in direct having conversations with publishers.
Yeah, so I guess kind of the last question that I have, and we'll kind of wrap up the NCAA talk in terms of, from what it sounds like, it kind of sounds like to me at this point there might have to be a little give and take in terms of what currently exists within the collegiate esports model, whatever that may look like in the NCAA model. Do you think there will be any give and take, or do you think that it'll be something that, and I know you said that payment of players and amateurism, it might only affect 0.01%, but do you think that there will be any give on the NCAA side with any of these issues, or,
Yeah. I think the best course of action for the NCAA right now, where can they add value to the collegiate esports landscape? It's the best approach for that. And I think just even through this, and probably just as well as I do, that there is a massive education gap from administrators, right, like presidents and provosts, and even deans and such, to what esports is and the value proposition to students. So I think that NCAA could really affect that positively of providing education, because I promise you, I would say at 99% of universities across the U.S., North America even, the esports is on a whiteboard somewhere. Like, hey, did you see this school doing it? Like, we should have a point of view, but it's just the bandwidth is maxed, right? They're like, So like maybe NCAA can add a role there of like just helping schools understand how it could play a role on campus. You'd mentioned the eligibility or amateurism. That is a bedrock principle.
It is.
I don't potentially see like any ways like, well, esports is okay to do this, that, and the other thing, because it flies in the face of every other sport.
It does.
But there are interesting nuances to that amateurism model of onboarding and how it exists, particularly in like some tennis or even bowling cases that are really interesting and potentially could play a role in what it looks like down the way. That's to say, we're assuming that esports will massively monetize on the college side in over 10 years. We don't know. What does the NCAA look like over 10 years? We don't know. So I think what the best course of action is, like, where can NCAA add value to what's happening now, right? And I think it's in education awareness. I also think it's in equity, right? And like gender equity and inclusion.
Definitely.
They have a department of like 10 people there. That's all they do and think about, because I think, every university, myself included, with Robert Morris, and everyone I've heard, and the whole industry wide, really is like, boy, we really would love to do more for gender, to help female esports, but we just, they don't have the levers or tools. And I think in college and high school even, that could be a really an important way that we can add value to the whole industry, is by fostering and nurturing and providing safe spaces for females to come and compete and feel safe in beating
that's huge
a male
too,
or competing with a male. So
definitely,
I think that's where NCAA can add massive value, not just on the college side, but for like industry wide. So I think right now the best way is like, okay, what are ways we could look to use what's there already and add in, rather than say, there's no world where it's like tomorrow there's an announcement of a green light, green button. It says, oh, it's
definitely. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take you kind of back to your time when you first started at Robert Morris and you're launching the program, and what was that, 2013, 2014 at the time? And I guess if you could just kind of go into what resources you had available at the time in launching the program, and what were some of maybe the early struggles and then early wins that you had launching that program your first year.
Sure. So it was it was really solving for like that education gap to the president of the university, and it was, and I understand, and I want everyone to understand that it was a lot easier for me because I'd been there for 10 plus years working as an administrator.
Sure.
And I had some like professional equity built up, right? I'd been on some like, I wasn't just in athletics, I was also on some longer range plans and that sort of thing. So I always say, like, if I was a 21-year-old me or 22-year-old me bringing that same concept forward, it'd be like, oh, thank you, buddy.
Yeah.
Right.
See you later. Yeah.
Like, unfortunately, right. Like, so it was a lot easier in that sense for me. Right. But, and I give a lot of credit to our president, who was somewhat forward thinking in the whole matter. But like what really helped, I guess, get him in his mind at the time over the hump of like adding it in athletics and not just sort of elevating. Well, we didn't even have a club team, or just just putting it in student services. Is I showed him. I brought an iPad with and showed him an LCS match, like where it was casted, right? So like, and I showed him like the desk host, right? And then it was Freak, and then it went to so that automatically clicked in his mind. He was a massive sports fan to like, oh, this feels like ESPN for him, right? Because it's not too dissimilar from a baseball broadcast that he would watch, or football or something. So it was really, I could almost see like in his the way he was like physically, like it changes, like, oh, like a light bulb clicks. So it's like providing that tangent to like traditional sports, at least for him, was like the motivator. And also, I helped him understand how large esports was, and how it could be like an educational tool through
it's
athletics.
Huge, definitely
through athletics, right? Through like athletics, and he was a big believer in this, as like acts like as a second classroom where you really develop soft skills, communication, students learn discipline. So like that was like the how sort of, once I got him on board, he was able to just like hammer through the rest of funding, where, why, and provide like a wide aperture for me to operate on campus. And it's a way different proposition at a smaller school like mine, Robert Morris, where it's 1,200 students, compared to say like your school, or like
Wichita State,
University of Illinois, where there's 40,000, and there's massive silos of departments. So in a lot of ways I had it easier than a lot of other programs. But it was unique because it was like the first, so it was still some risk added to it. But
so I guess as you see all of these esports programs starting to crop up at all these different colleges now, in terms of advice, is there any advice that you have that you would say of these for these first year programs? What pitfalls would you, I guess, try and avoid, and what are some of the things that we should be striving towards, I guess, in our first year?
Yeah, it's really interesting, because that's a lot of the research we did was try to get the motivation, like why are schools adding, right? And what's the motivation behind that? And it's really interesting to see where that lies, and I'll get back to like where it lies. Remind me if I don't. But I think the pitfalls are adding esports for the wrong reason is a massive pitfall. I think the North Star in it all should be like, are we providing value to the student experience? Rather than just sort of hitching a wagon to like a hot topic of a thing. So I think if schools want to add esports, that they should devote resources to it, and not try to say like, okay, well, yeah, we just really don't like, can this make us money, or can we be cost neutral? That's not the thought process that goes into when they're adding a lacrosse team, right? They know they're not going to monetize a lacrosse team.
At this point, probably not.
They're adding for the value to the student, and what's going to mean to what does that add to the student experience, to the team experience, to the culture of athletics, and then broader to the university, right? Creating a community and such. So going back to like motivations, it was interesting to see across like divisional membership 1, 2s, and 3s, there were similar motivations, but they were organized differently across the divisional membership. So on the Division 3 side, the number one motivation was enrollment, right? Which, and I
understand that. I get that.
I believe it can be a good tool, because I think it's there's tons of players, right? And they want to have that experience and continue what they're passionate about at a university level. But where it falls flat for me is if it's Roman is the main driver, and they get shoved into an existing computer lab, and they get a stipend of 150 participation dollars, when tuition is that, then I'm not sure that's really providing value. And there's no coach, or there's no staff, and there's no buy-in of the brand of gear or whatever. That falls flat for me as far as like a value proposition back to the student. And I'm not saying all schools are doing that. They're certainly not. Some are approaching a Division 3 side unbelievably well. Like Trine University, I think, are doing some spectacular job.
I've been on their website. It's good stuff.
Illinois Wesleyan is doing a great job. and I'm not here calling out good and bad. I'm saying like,
yeah, it's a tough path to go down.
I know firsthand, right, of those programs that
Sure,
are adding
sure.
value and are doing it well because
Yeah.
they're putting like resources and really are operating like us, keeping in mind like that student experience. Division II side, it was like engagement, student engagement was really a big fact. They have these clubs like, okay, can we build a facility where we're engaging students? We know then that will have a positive effect on their overall outcome. They'll feel part of a peer group. Enrollment was part of that also. The Division I was really engagement was like the number one. Like if you think about let's say University of Washington, right? 2,000 students in their gaming club.
Yeah.
They're like, okay, well, how do we address these students and support them? But also, like in the back of those Division I minds is like, well, is there a broadcast element potentially, a monetization over time? So it's interesting to see. But I think the pitfalls of esports right now are college side are like, okay, when schools are adding, like, I hope that motivation is accurate and spot on. And it's not going to save your dying school if you're like dying from enrollment just by adding. Like you have to put something behind it.
Definitely. So I think for me, in terms of esports here at Wichita State, we've gone about it the right way, and just in terms of making sure that there are those key educational components, starting out small, building it incrementally throughout the next couple of semesters, not just adding 7 varsity titles and just kind of hoping that it works. And so that's kind of going to lead me into my next question in terms of how do you decide as a director what varsity titles to enter into? Because I know Battle Royale, that's the big thing going on right now, and you see Battle Royale games being added, and popularity between those games, either going up or going down and things like that. And so you see students who play a lot of different games. Some games may die, some games may become more popular. So how do you manage that as a director?
Yeah, I think it's really when we make title decisions, it's really on what is being driven by the students, right? And what
Sure.
What is the mass amount of students playing, and is there really a depth to a title that you could develop like a mastery level? Because I think that's where you could really develop growth through coaching and through structure. You mentioned Battle Royale. I also think like a necessary element might be like there should be like some sort of format for college competition that is structured and organized.
Yeah, definitely.
So like you don't control lobbies, then I think we're just like maybe it kind of falls a little flat because then you're just kind of coming in and playing video games. I think there still could be value in growing that, but I think to me like that college to college competition creates some unique relevancy to what's happening. And I say that may not come, but to your point, and it's another certainly is a hurdle on the NCAA side is just that. It's like rise and fall of titles, right?
Sure.
How does that get addressed? And if you look at like Heroes of the Storm, right?
Yeah, that was tough.
Yeah, yeah, and it's really interesting because at Rob Morris, like we actually scholarship for Heroes players. So it's like publishers, and it's 100% they're right, because they're like, well, this doesn't make financial sense for like Blizzard, like we got to divert resources, right? But maybe there's a better conversation that holistically schools to publishers can have to have better understanding or knowledge base, so it can be addressed on the other side, right? Like we're still obviously seeing out our hot Heroes of the Storm players for sure through, but and they'll still compete, but
sure.
Certainly just was it's disappointing, right, for them especially.
Yeah, definitely. But so you touched a little bit on scholarshiping at Robert Morris. So if you don't mind describing to me kind of the scholarship structure at Robert Morris, and I know that the size and distinction of the school is different compared to Wichita State and things like that. So I guess in terms of like what you've seen at other schools, possibly at Boise State and public institutions like that, have you seen any? I guess what is there a right way to go about scholarshiping? Because I see a lot of different models that schools have applied.
Yeah, you're right about that. There is no standard, and there's no just across the board way. We address it the same way as we scholarship the same ways we do say for like our men's baseball team.
Sure.
And handle some other teams like our hockey teams and such. So like, we have two scholarship models, like a varsity and varsity reserve. Varsity was like it's a percentage of tuition. I want to say it was like 60 to 70% tuition for A's, like for a varsity, and varsity reserve like 30, something like that, 30% tuition. So it's significant. It's like past our discount rate to and it's hard to say that's the exact, because if you bring an academic scholarship in ACT or GPA, then that gets like balanced into all that. Same with FAFSA, so it's kind of a sliding scale with it all. So there's no like straight answer to what it is, because it really depends on like your FAFSA and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, to your point, when you see like a Columbia College or a Maryville, right? They're offering significant scholarships.
Sure,
It's
definitely.
great for those students. It's spectacular for those students. And some schools are like have $500 stipend or whatever. So I think what's interesting, again, just thinking back to like what potential value add like an association could bring is like, okay, like here's a minimum model, and this is what it looks like if you want to be involved in this, and of this is a structure set, and this are when football, say a school wants to add a football team, there are minimum guidelines of facility and also awarding that are provided, and there's maximums too, obviously. But so I think potentially I could add a value proponent or sort of provide some guidance to the space. But I don't have an answer, because schools approach it so differently. I just go back to, I hope when schools are approaching esports or wanting to onboard it, that the motivation is like value to the student, and they're appreciating that that's a real talent award, potentially, to some of the esports they're adding. So I think it should be valued as such, similar to other awards that are given.
Definitely. So I think to kind of wrap it up here, I'll kind of get you with one more question. Just in terms, so if I'm a parent, and I get this all the time as kind of a new coordinator, and I have students who come through the office all the time, and their parents come through, and the student says, I play Fortnite for a couple hours a day, I play Overwatch for a couple hours, or I'm a jungler, or this or that, and they ask, and the parents come through and they ask, how should my student be, or should my son or daughter, whomever, be playing X amount of hours a day, or can you provide that type of balance here at college at Wichita State? So I guess for somebody who's been in the scene for so long, could you describe or what you do at Robert Morris in terms of balance and for the collegiate athletes and things like that? And I guess if you could just describe that process and how important it is to have a proper balance.
Yeah, you're spot on. That is a question I get a lot of times.
I get it
from
lots.
parents,
Yes.
right? And the way we address it is we tell them what our schedule looks like, and we basically go from like 4:30 or 5 to like 9 with an hour break for like our varsity teams. And I think that's an okay kind of construct for a varsity team seasonality wise of what it looks like. Now, do they go back to the dorms and play more and stay up till 2 a.m. playing? Right. That's similar to like if we have a soccer player and we have practice and then they leave. Do they go and run 5 miles or something? Right.
Yeah.
There's physical limitations to it, certainly. But I think the barometer that we use is like academic performance, and so we. Similar to our other athletic
That's
teams,
interesting.
we issue like grade report sheets, and so we monitor how they're doing in the classrooms. Are they going to class? How are they doing? So we have.
Do you have staff that helps you with that as well?
Yeah. Well, we similar to how our coaches do it. We give it's on the student responsibility. We have an official grade sheet from the department. So like get this filled out from your teachers as you go through the week, hand it in, and if they're not showing up to class or if they're doing poorly, we'll hold them out of practices and games painfully sometimes, and we'll have them in study hall in that time. And really, you leverage like that passion for the game, and they don't want to let their teammates down at the end of the day. So that is really the best move. We can't save them all, because sometimes it's just not possible in esports or athletics. But I found like that is the best sort of barometer to see, like, is it are they putting too much time into this or that, or a girlfriend or a boyfriend, right? Like that's not just always the game.
Yeah,
maybe
definitely.
That at least is how we've kind of approached it, and I think is similar to really traditional athletics and that measurement tool.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Kurt. I appreciate your time. Thank you for coming on and answering a lot of these questions. I know some of them you probably answered a lot at this point, but I know it's going to be extremely valuable just to hear for our students to hear from a different perspective than just from me in terms of balance, in terms of how important it is to offer scholarshiping and infrastructure within the university here at Wichita State. So I'm very appreciative of your time. Thank you so much for coming on, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. Thank you for the work you're doing there. I think it's really awesome, and I think like Wichita is setting a structure and a way to go forward that's really positive. And I think a lot. I'm sure you'll be reached out by many other schools, and I think just the more education we can all provide to other administrators that may approach you or me or anyone watching is just explain what it is, how it is, and potentially the way you see it being structured, the way I see it being structured, it will add value to the space. And feel free, anyone watching, if they want to reach out to me, I'm happy to answer and trying to. I think we're all together trying to get it right and figure it out the right way.
Definitely. Do you have a quick social media plug at all or anything like that?
Oh yeah. Follow me on Twitter it's from Kurt, or you can email me at kmelcher@intersportnet.com.
There you go. Well, you heard it here first. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time, Kurt. Thank you.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.